Ngwala, the chairperson of Sanef, and members of the management committee of Sanef, editors and journalists who are part of today's discussion, and our audience both online and on TV. I'm pleased to host today's interaction between our president and the South African National Editors Forum. This is not our first engagement, but it's another platform for interaction between the president and Sanef as a representative and voice of journalism in our society. As a friend of the media and a strong believer in open democracy and transparency, my predecessor, the late Minister Jackson Mthembu, was a passionate advocate of this platform. So, Mr. President, today's question and answer session follows your recent State of the Nation address, as well as the Ministers of Finance tabling of the budget of 2021-22 financial year. And we'll be in dialogue today as the COVID-19 vaccines are being rolled out across our nation, which is a great step forward to making sure that we achieve your goal of protecting lives and making sure that we get back to the new normal with safe communities. A great deal is unfolding in our country, and today is an opportunity for to explore this and other issues with our head of state and government. I then would like to invite Mr. Ngwala, the chair of Sanef, to introduce Sanef members and set the scene for today's discussion.
Thank you, Minister Njabeni. I hope that I'm audible, colleagues. Mr. President, colleagues, good afternoon. Mr. President, we meet exactly a week away from the date when the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in our country. I think all of us remember that test statement that mentioned that a 38-year-old male who had traveled to Italy with his wife had tested positive for COVID-19. And I think from that moment on, we've since moved on from a society that thought that we were unaffected by the coronavirus to one that continues to grieve for loved ones and pray for the recovery of those who are in hospital. Mr. President, we've seen colleagues, family, and friends lose their jobs and continue to struggle under these tough economic times. But that said, here we are, and we welcome this first engagement with you for the year 2021, and we hope that we'll continue to do so over the next 3 quarters of the year. Mr. President, before I introduce my colleagues who are here, I would like to abuse a privilege, and I think that it would be remiss of me if I didn't address the issue that has dominated headlines and timelines of social media platforms. That is the issue involving ENCA journalist Lindsay Dentlinger and the interviews that she conducted with various politicians recently. I think this issue and the response that it has elicited should be one big lesson for us as the media industry. And it is not just about ENCA or their journalists, but it is about us as the media and as journalists who care about our profession and also the relationship that we have with the audiences that we serve. As a starting point, I think that it challenges us as newsrooms to now introduce standards of procedure in terms of how we treat guests during these times of COVID-19. If it becomes an unwavering rule in every newsroom to make sure that journalists on the field wear masks and also ask their guests to wear masks, that way we won't have to deal with such a situation where we are seen as the media to be treating white politicians differently from black politicians. Secondly, I think it is important for us to acknowledge that those who are angry about this incident are justified. The individuals who feel affronted have a right to be angry, and they also have a right to be heard. We should not be dismissive of their feelings. This country has a dark and a painful history of racial prejudice and violence, and it is not for anyone to tell those who feel racially maligned that they are being malicious. This is a moment that calls for cool heads and for reflection. And as journalists, we are people. We all have our unconscious biases. Therefore, it is important that we take the time to reflect on our actions and also how we relate to our guests and audiences. Where we have made mistakes, we should admit our mistakes. We should not be defensive and cast those who criticize us as being malicious. Journalists are not above criticism. That is why I feel that the statement released by ENCA last night is quite unfortunate, and it lacked the maturity that this moment demands. This is not the time for us to bury our heads in the sand and to be defensive, because such a position only serves to harden attitudes and perpetuate perceptions that we don't care about the feelings of those who feel wronged. I must add, though, that it is quite encouraging that Lindsay has reached out to the gentleman who felt othered by her actions. It shows that she was sensitive and mindful of how the incident made them feel. I think for us as the media, this incident gives us an opportunity to move forward and to draw important lessons from this episode. We have to understand the power we possess as the media and how our portrayal of people and groups of people influences our audiences and their attitudes towards those people. We know the role that we have to play. It's an important role in advancing our democracy. It is power that we have to handle delicately and with the sensitivity that it requires. That is why, lastly, it is important that newsrooms introduce and encourage diversity training so that we can be more aware of diversity issues, and also to arm our journalists so that they can work better with people who have different backgrounds and qualities to our own. I think this will assist us to be more aware of the limitations of our own worldview and be more sensitive to our cultural differences. More importantly, it will assist us to deal with our unconscious bias. From our side as Sanef, we have our subcommittee on diversity, whom will task to undertake this important project. Mr. President, you recently delivered your State of the Nation address, and 2 days ago, the Minister of Finance delivered his budget speech. I'm sure there's a lot that you want to share with us, and there's a lot that our colleagues want to raise during this session. Importantly, I'd like to introduce our members of council, the Council of Sanef, and also our management committee who are here. But more importantly, we also have journalists who represent various media houses. I would say that we have a fair representation of our industry attending this session today. So that said, Mr. President, let me not take any more of your time and hand back to the Minister. And once again, thank you for making the time to meet with us. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Ms. Wu. And thank you for confronting the issue that is making South Africa discuss the role of the media and whether you can be held to account when you have erred. And it's good that as chairperson of Sanef and the leadership of Sanef has acknowledged the weaknesses, and you also prepared to move to the feelings of the people of South Africa as a journalist that continue to become the voice of our people when it is necessary. And therefore, that statement that you've just made, it's important for us to, in terms of connection. Mr. President, I'll then request you and invite you to respond to the opening remarks of Mr. Ngwa.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, Program Director. And let me also extend not only my greetings, but also my thanks to the chairperson of Sanef, Sbu Ngalwa, and editors and colleagues, and good afternoon. I do welcome this opportunity to engage once again on issues of national importance, in particular, the priorities and tasks that we outlined in the State of the Nation. I had wanted to engage with you all a little earlier when the issues were still fresh, but I guess we all had other engagements. But this is still an apt time for us to be able to engage and exchange some views and thoughts. I just saw a headline announcing this engagement, that President to be grilled by the media. And as you were speaking, Sbu, I imagined that you might be having some baula somewhere there, a brazier about ready to grill me and turn me over and all that. You are just too friendly a guy. I trust that's not the imagery that will ensue. But thank you also right at the beginning for addressing the issue you've just addressed. When I saw what happened outside the doors of Parliament, I was quite disturbed. But thank you for raising it in the sensitive manner that you have raised it. And we should all, as South Africans, accept the position that you and Sanef are taking on this matter. And we all learn, we all make mistakes. And let's hope that this will continue to be what guides us as we deal with many issues in our country. Many of the issues that we discussed in the State of the Nation address have been discussed and debated over the past 2 weeks, both in Parliament, in the media, and across society more broadly. When I introduced the State of the Nation address, I made the point that this is no ordinary year, and I think all South Africans will attest to that. We are living through a very difficult time, and the SONA that we had to deliver was not an ordinary SONA. Instead of outlining what you would call the full range of government programs for the year, we sought to focus on a few overriding priorities that are meant to address the current conjuncture, the current period that we are in. First, we said we must defeat the coronavirus pandemic, because that is prominent in everybody's mind right now. The vaccination program is one of the central pillars of this effort. Last week, we've started phase 1 of the program with the vaccination of health workers. And may I say, I also got vaccinated, and some amongst you were saying, well, the president should have been last to be vaccinated. We did debate this issue and postulated on it quite extensively, and felt that with the saga that we've been through with AstraZeneca, it was important that we should show confidence in the vaccine that was administered. I had wanted to be the very last when we came up with the vaccination program, but it was decided that I should be amongst the first. And to date, we have administered over 52,000 vaccines, just above 52,000. Further doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be arriving in the coming weeks. And in fact, a batch is about to arrive in the country in a day or two. And then we will have further hundreds of thousands also arriving. As has been reported, in addition to the 12 million doses that we will be receiving through the COVAX facility, we have secured further doses directly from Pfizer, as well as Johnson & Johnson. Negotiations with other suppliers are ongoing, and those are with various entities like the Sputnik and the Chinese and a number of others, including Cuba and a few others. And we are confident that we will be able to secure the quantities that we require. Even as the vaccine rollout gathers pace, I believe that it will be necessary to continue to pass on the message that our people must wear masks and the social distancing must be the order of the day, and we should avoid crowded places. South Africa has emerged from a second wave of infections, and we must now do everything within our means to contain further surges. This is vitally important if we are to restore our economy to full operation. And in the coming weeks, we will be meeting with premiers, metro mayors, and other stakeholders to assess the situation and to decide on appropriate measures of dealing with the pandemic going forward, now that we are where we are, with the infections tapering down. Obviously, people are asking, should we be remaining at level 3, or should we be opening up more and more space for the economy? Because our second overriding priority is to accelerate and open up the economy, but to accelerate economic recovery. Our focus on infrastructure investment, the public and social employment, the whole issue of localization and support that we need to give to struggling companies and households was reflected in the budget priorities announced by the Minister of Finance this week. Now, a critical part of our recovery is to use competition law, procurement, and sectoral master plans to create space for new entrants and particularly for the development of small, medium enterprises. Now, we remain committed to reducing our sovereign debt in a responsible manner, changing the composition of our spending more from consumption towards investment, and sustaining spending on health and education. Our third priority is to implement the economic reforms that we've been talking about, reforms that have also been raised by our key role players, business and labor and communities. We have already seen progress in areas that have long been stalled, where not much activity was happening, including the expansion of our energy generation capacity. Just yesterday, we saw an announcement of self-generation, the largest in our country, of 40 megawatts by a private company, and more of these will be coming. And we've also focused on digital migration. The issue of skills is also key, and the rail and port development. Now, through Operation Vulindlela, open the way, as they say, working with implementing departments and agencies, we expect to see important progress, particularly in the coming months. And this will help to reduce the cost of doing business and also increase the overall competitiveness of our economy. Our fourth and final overriding priority is to fight corruption and to strengthen state capacity. Among other things, we have embarked on a process to professionalize the public service. It is a long-term process, but everybody is embracing this initiative. A series of structured consultations are underway on various measures to reduce political interference in administration, ensure more stability in the tenure of senior public servants, and introduce more rigorous requirements for the appointment as well as promotion of all these key officials. Clear progress has been made in rebuilding law enforcement agencies, ensuring that they are better capacitated and coordinating their efforts more effectively. But in the end, I would like to say that the fight against corruption is gaining momentum. And I would say that it is unstoppable. It will continue, and this time round, it will not be stopped. The State of the Nation address was presented just 4 months after we announced the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. This SONA was therefore not about presenting new ideas or new plans. It was about reporting on what we have done in those 4 months, what progress is underway, and what action we plan to take in the year ahead. Before I conclude, I'd like to commend the media for the vital role that you've been playing in keeping South Africans informed, particularly during this crisis. This work will become increasingly important as we confront disinformation, unsubstantiated rumors around the efficacy and safety of the vaccines. As a country, I think we have a huge mountain to climb, but we know that the path that we have to take is a difficult path. We do have the means and the will and the stamina, may I add, And we've made a solid start. It's not a shabby start, it's a solid start. And thank you once again for this opportunity. And I look forward to engagement with you, to being grilled by all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for those remarks. And the grilling starts now. So we are going we are going to take the first round of questions, and I'll take 5 hands. And we have the questions. Can we keep the questions brief and direct? And then we can then start, the president will respond and will then take the next set. Can I see a show of hands? Mr. Peter de Deut, you can start.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, your predecessor has made his disdain for the rule of law clear. He and the leader of the EFF have in recent times launched a number of unsubstantiated attacks on the judiciary, making damaging claims of, among other things, judges being bought. And you've in response made a statement saying that the rule of law must be expected. But does Mr. Zuma's rejection of the authority of the country's highest court, his attacks on judges, and his refusal to adhere to the subpoena by the Zondo Commission undermine you and your party's credibility? And if the president and his party does not unequivocally and clearly condemn this, and in no uncertain terms, should we fear for the future of an independent judiciary? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I request that in future, everybody who's going to speak, we should not make preambles or make speeches. We ask the questions directly so that we can have more opportunities. Can we have Brian Sokutu with the next question?
Mr. President, mine is just a follow-up to Peter's question, Brian Sokutu from The Citizen. I just wanted to understand how are you personally dealing with that fallout with the former president, and whether this puts any strain on you as a head of state and as president of the ruling party? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Can we have Adrian Basson with a question?
Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, President Ramaphosa. Thank you for having us again. I think I want to stay in the week of the budget by asking the President, Mr. President, when are we going to actually see the infrastructure project book on the table? We've been hearing a lot about the infrastructure investments, but when can we actually expect to see the bankable projects? And just also linked to the economy, the Minister of Finance has in recent times started the idea of a state bank again as a vehicle to funding transformation and growth in South Africa. What is your personal view of a state bank? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. I can't see another hand. Mr. President, I'll invite you to the press. Mr. President, before you respond, can I have Christian Duplessis asking the next question? Thank you.
Hi, Minister. Let me just start my video. Hi, Mr. President. This is Christian Duplessis from Netwerk 24. Mr. President, can you just give a bit more information about how we are dealing with the pandemic going forward with regards to level 3? What is the considerations that we need to take into account? Why is it so difficult at this stage to decide where to go to from here, just to give a public broader sense of where we're heading? Thank you so much.
Thank you. May we have Warafana asking the last question for this round.
Okay, Bulela, Minister, Bulela, President. Eastern Cape isandugxotha uyekisa 32 pharmacists emsebenzini. Ndicela ubuze ngaba kanye ngexesha siphila kulo le-COVID abantu bayekiswa emsebenzini siyeva noogqirha bazakwazi uyekiswa e-Eastern Cape. Ingaba upresident uthini na ngaloo nto leyo? Enkosi.
Thank you, Warafana. Mr. President, I'll hand over to you to deal with the first set of questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. In relation, I guess, to with the first question by Peter du Toit and Brian Sokutu, which has to do with former President Jacob Zuma's reluctance and or refusal to go to the Zondo Commission. He has articulated his reasons for not wanting to go there. I made my position very clear in my weekly letter just this Monday, and argued that attack on judges is an attack on our constitution. Judges take an oath to be faithful not only to the constitution but to our country, and they are an independent arm of the state. And I will continue to argue that if there is any accusation that has to be made against the judiciary, it must be substantiated. If there is any form of evidence, let it be put before the bodies that deal with this matter. We've got the Judicial Services Commission that deals with matters that may be either misdemeanors of judges or inappropriate conduct by our judiciary. So we've got structures, we've got institutions that deal with these matters. So those who just throw accusations at judges demean our constitution, our democracy, and indeed our nation. Judges are not above the law. No one is above the law. All of us as South Africans, from president to any citizen in our country, must abide by the law, by the constitution. Because if we don't, then there is lawlessness in our country. I made that very clear in my weekly letter. With regards to former President Jacob Zuma, there are quite a number of engagements that are happening, and one of those is an engagement that he's going to be having with the top leadership of the ANC, which should be happening any day soon. And it's been agreed, he's agreed to it, and we've all agreed to it, that we are going to engage with him. He is a member, and a disciplined member of the African National Congress, and we will be able to have an engagement with him. And the message will be fairly simple and straightforward, that let us all abide by our constitution, respect our institutions, particularly the judiciary. Now, does this matter have any bearing on myself, challenge? No. The important thing for me as President of the Republic is to insist that all of us must abide by the rule of law and the Constitution of the Republic. And that is the sum total of what I stand for as the President of the Republic. So there is no backing down in as far as that is concerned. And I hope that covers Peter du Toit and Brian's question as well. In relation to Adrian's question about the infrastructure projects, and I can understand that people want to know where are these infrastructure projects. 2 years ago, when I addressed the nation, I said, I'd like us to set up an infrastructure fund. It has taken time, much longer than I had wanted to see, but the infrastructure fund has now been set up. And it is now set up in a way where we are going to invite the private sector to participate with government in this infrastructure fund. We've laid out quite a lot of money with view of ensuring that infrastructure does become the centerpiece of our recovery project. As we speak, and one of the other issues that I really highlighted to my colleagues is that I no longer want to hear us say, we are going to build this, we are going to build that, we are going to build that. I want the projects to start. And if I ever to go to those projects, I want to see projects that are already underway and not promises to our people any longer. But in any event, as we speak, in just the third week of March, we're going to see a major project in the Northern Cape, in the Postmansberg area, where we're going to have a 12 billion rand investment for 100 megawatts of concentrated solar power project that will be taking place in the Postmansberg area. And preferred bidders have already been appointed, and there is a procurement program that will be announced in March. And human settlements, a number of projects are project ready, shovel ready, and they're also going to start. On transport, we are going to be seeing in the next 2 months road tenders to the value of 11.6 billion are now at procurement stage. And these are some of the issues that I never really wanted to be broadcasting now. I actually want the work to start. And I know that we are all impatient. We all want to see where these projects are. We want to see the cranes. But all of this is going to get underway. With regards to water, 23 billion rand for the Umkomazi water project is going to get underway. On ICT, a number of other projects, and student housing, precisely some of those projects that I've spoken about. And the good thing with this important pillar of our recovery process is that we are attracting a number of development institutions to participate, and we are attracting the private sector to also participate. And I'm expecting that this will gather moss, it will gather momentum as we move on, because at times you need to start with a project and the investors then see that something is happening. I've often believed that it is us as South Africans who must invest. And as we invest, outsiders will really see that, well, these people are serious about their own economy and they have good confidence in the economy of their country. Now, what is my view on a state bank? I fully support the establishment of a state bank at an organizational and at a personal level. There is space for state bank. The land bank is a state bank. The IDC, if you like, is a state bank. And many countries, developing countries, have a number of state banks. You look at a country like China, they have a plethora of banks, agriculture bank, construction bank, and a whole number of others. And the banking sector in our country is dominated by just 4 or 5 banks. And we therefore need to open up space for more competition so that if any entrepreneur, any business person wants to get a loan, they should not just be limited to 3 or 4 banks. They must be able to shop around, get the best on offer. Yes, of course, we do have a number of others, like for the small medium enterprises like SIFA and MEGA that Minister Chabeni oversees. Those also give loans. Now, a state bank would be a much larger one. And of course, we will ensure that it's run properly in terms of corporate governance and all that. And it needs to be properly capitalized. I mean, for instance, if we had such an entity, even the 200 billion rand that we've asked the banks to administer as part of the COVID relief, some of it could have been channeled towards that type of bank. And their requirements would have been the type of requirements that would also promote development. And truth be told, our banking sector is risk averse. They're immensely risk averse. I was listening this morning to a person who runs CIFA or one of these entities that gives loans to medium enterprise. They said our banks are risk averse, and they are entities that operate in the middle sector, and they are willing to take more risk. And even as they take risk, they find that the bad debts are not exponentially high. And so therefore we need more banks, and the state bank would be able to address that. And of course, I would insist that it must be run in accordance with the best of governance principles. Level 3, how are we dealing, or better still, let me say, how are we dealing with the pandemic? We are guided by science. We've always said that. We're guided by the outstanding scientists that we've got, medical scientists and epidemiological scientists, as well as genetic scientists. And we've got many of them in our country. And I feel comfortable each time that I have to take a decision, that it is a decision that is based on very good scientific and well-tested information that is put before us. And I'm very proud to have the type of scientists that we have, because they've proven that they're leading scientists in the world. They are ahead of the curve of the world in many, many cases in as far as dealing with the pandemic. And so therefore, we are in conversation with them. They are meeting in their own committees, and the National Coronavirus Command Council meets every week, as you know, and we are giving consideration to how we should continue managing the pandemic. As we speak now, the rate of infections have tapered down, and it does require us to re-examine exactly where we are. And shortly we will be coming up with announcements in relation to how we continue managing the pandemic going forward. And of course, in doing so, we're often concerned about indicators and events that are going to be coming. In December, we were worried about Christmas period, and then there was the second wave. Now we need to keep our eye on the Easter period, where people gather in large numbers. So all those are matters that we need to take into account and balance it all with the scientific information that we get from our scientists. I think that deals with Rafa from the Eastern Cape. I think I didn't quite hear everything. Mfondini bowuthethela phansi andikuvanga kakuhle yonke lento bowuyithetha. Kodwa ndive
ndikhona ngokumongameli.
Ndikuve kancinci.
Okay. Mongameli, for the past 2 months, Eastern Cape has shared imisebenzi 832 ye-pharmacists. Ngokabantwana abaphelelwe imisebenzi. Ngoku kukho iiripoti ezintsha ezithi oogqirha nabo abathile bazaphelelwa imisebenzi. Ngoku Mongameli, inombuzo nje endiwubuzayo, kakanye ngexesha le-epidemic enje efana corona, kube kungona kupheliswa imisebenzi ebalulekileyo efana nento bazii-pharmacies. Ingaba ngoku enaba ngoku sibona ngokwama-comrade ingawo ngokafaka amayeza ebantwini bethu ezilalini.
No, ndikuvile ke ngoku, ndikuve kakuhle. Now that is an issue that is affecting the Eastern Cape. I was not aware of it. It's a matter that I would want to gain line of sight on, because yes, you're absolutely right. If we've got young people who are either pharmacists, who are health workers, and at a time when we are going through a pandemic like this, we need to be careful about just putting them on the retrenchment or dismissal list. And more particularly as we are now going to be vaccinating a large portion of our population. It is a matter that we need to look at because a number of those young people are those that we can use more effectively in the rural areas. So it is a matter that I'll get my office to look at more closely and discuss it with the Premier. And I will be going to the Eastern Cape myself, and I will also have a closer look at this. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. In future, if the President has not heard your question, don't interrupt him. We'll give you an opportunity to re-ask the question so that we can have an orderly discussion. I'll now ask Sibonga Konke Shoba to, his hand is up physically. He does not know how to use the technology to raise his question, and then I'll take the next.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Technological issues, we have challenges there. My question, I've got two questions, Mr. President. The first one, there's been a lot of speculation about your Minister of Finance. A lot of people are saying that he didn't want to stay a full term in your cabinet. Have you persuaded him to finish the whole term, or are you still looking for a replacement? Secondly, there are two vacancies in your executive, if I'm not mistaken. Are you looking at filling those vacancies anytime soon? And are you just going to fill in those vacancies, or are you looking at a broad reshuffle? Thank you.
Thank you, Sibonga Konke. Let me tell you, ministers don't like that discussion. So on behalf of my colleagues, we don't like that discussion coming up. May I invite Mr. Paul Vichato to ask the next question.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and Madam Minister. Thank you. Following on that, there have been reports that the President has had discussions with the Governor of the Reserve Bank to possibly become Finance Minister. Could he please tell us about that, if that happened? And then secondly, does he plan to continue to reduce the size of cabinet? He did it in his last cabinet appointments. Will he continue with that exercise? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You're insisting on those questions that we really don't like. May I have Chairman Makadi asking the next question?
Thank you so much, Minister, and good afternoon, Mr. President. With specific reference to special economic zones, what is your update on that front? And what kind of model would you like to see for South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we have Nabi Samagunga with the next question?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and thank you so much for your time. Mr. President, may I just take you back to the first round of questions we had? What is your understanding of the visit by the police minister to the former president's home? And importantly, do you believe that it was, even if it was in his capacity as a leader of your party, do you believe that it was appropriate, even advisable for him to have gone there, given the context of the legal challenges of the former president? And also, what would you say to people who say it is a demonstration that not all are equal before the law? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nabisa. The last question on this round is Jan Dilang. You are muted, Jan.
Sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Over the last 10 months or so, I've been very privileged to interview various Black emerging farmers in several parts of the country to discuss their service from the service that they get from the Department of Land Affairs. And I made appalling discoveries. In Mpumalanga, I interviewed 27 Black farmers who were all the victims of attempts of corruption to force payments from them, amongst them an exceptional man called John Mabasa, who has a very successful mixed farming business near Amalo, who bought his stud cattle from your stock, from your private stock. He has 270 beautiful beef masters, as well as 470 hectares of land of millie grace that he started planting just the day after I visited him in October. He sent me pictures yesterday. Those millies are 30 or 40 centimeters higher than he is, about 6 foot tall, 1.75 meters, like you and me. And he's been living on that farm for 5 generations. I visited the graves of his ancestors.
Jan, ask the question so that we can have more time.
Yes, he's been asked to pay 250,000 rand to stay on that farm where he lives for 5 generations. All 27 members of that association were victims of similar issues. In the Western Cape, we have Mr. Ivan Klutter just recently. And I want to point out that this department has to administer the process of Section 25, the amendments to enable expropriations without compensation. Can you give us an idea what is are you aware of this situation? What do you think should be done? I've been trying to convey this to the minister, and it was to no avail over 6 months.
Thank you, Jan. The question is...
Sorry for taking the time on that.
Thank you. Mr. President, that's the second round of our questions. I hand over to you for the response.
Thank you. Firstly, to Shoba about the Minister of Finance. I know nothing about a replacement of the Minister of Finance. This is news to me. There is no such plan, there is no such intention, and there's been no such discussion as well. The Minister of Finance continues to do his work. He's been doing it extremely well. He's built a very good young team in Treasury that is really demonstrating that they've come to grips with these complex matters of finance, and they're doing very well from the Director General right through to the DDGs and a number of other officials. They have really become a solid team that is also innovative. And I know that a number of people have tended to say that Treasury does not have the gravitas and the standing it used to have. I tell you, interact with these and largely young people, women, well represented are the demographics of our country in that team as well. They are really the pride of our nation, and the minister leads that team, and he's been doing very, very well indeed. You saw how he delivered the medium-term budget statement, and now the budget, and well supported by his team. So there's no intention to do anything there in that regard. What about the other vacancies? Yes, there are vacancies that have to be filled. And we are giving consideration to that. Yes, at the appropriate time, the decisions will be taken and the announcement will be made. And Paul asked whether I've had any discussions with the governor of the central bank, of the Reserve Bank. Yes, as president, it is my job as well to be briefed by the governor of the central bank about a whole number of matters, but we've had no discussion that goes beyond what we need to talk about, which is the monetary position. And central banker remains independent, and which is what I support very, very strongly. And we are even careful about what we talk about, because what we talk about should never even begin to touch on issues that have to do with the work that they have to do, where independence has to be the order of the day. The question from Paul again about reducing the size of the cabinet. We reduced the size of the cabinet. Things in government take time to, settle into place, and we are proceeding to bed down, as they say colloquially, the processes that we initiated before, and so there is no such intention at the moment. I think Chairman Makadi asked about economic zones, EPZs. EPZs are a very important addition to the economic activity in our country. They are job creators, but they are also bringing foreign direct investments. But apart from that, they also bring in technology into our country. And the EPZs that we are establishing are doing extremely well. And one entity, the Kucha development company, the corporation that we've got, has developed a great proficiency in establishing EPZs for a number of places in our country. And they're also going continental now. They are advising the setting up of EPZs in a number of countries on our continent, as I said in my reply to the State of the Nation. And they are becoming a pride of our country because they've advised the Tshwane, and they've helped to set up the Tshwane EPZ, which is going to be the auto EPZ. And they're also advising others. So I think the EPZs have a very important role in the growth of our economy, like they do in a number of other countries. China is a very good example. The economy of China was also largely initiated by the setting up of EPZs, and today they are the number 2 economy in the world because of the spark that was lit in the initial EPZs that they formed. Oh yes, then there was a question. I didn't get the name of the colleague who asked the question because I was still taking notes, but it was about the visit by the Minister of Police to former President Jacob Zuma's home. The Minister of Police, he occupies, yes, a very key position, and he felt impelled to go and have a discussion with former President Jacob Zuma. They come from far, the two of them. They've worked together in a number of situations, and he wanted to go and have a heart-to-heart discussion with former President Jacob Zuma. I know there will be views that because he occupies this position as a Minister of Police, he should not have done so, because it could conjure up notions that other people are not all equal before the law. I don't think we should even go there, because I'd like to dispel that notion, because from the report that he gave me, all they really ever discussed was the situation that former President Zuma is in now in relation to going to testify to the Zondo Commission. And it had nothing to do with whatever case, and that I can assure you that it was just as plain and as pure as that. Jan de Lange raises issues and challenges that black farmers are having, the 27 that you're talking about in Mpumalanga. I'm going to want to follow this one up, because being a farmer myself, I would like to get line of sight of this, because farming is a very difficult calling and occupation. You really hardly ever make the type of money that people often think you make. And if you are going to be lumped with large sums of money that you should pay as a small farmer. It could make your life and your enterprise even much more difficult. So I'd like to get more information, and we'll be following these types of challenges up with the minister, because we should be more supportive to our Black emerging farmers rather than try and discourage them from participating more profitably in farming. To have 250,000 being loaded onto you that you should pay for a 400 hectare farm, it's a lot of money, and we need to find out whatever that is for. So if we can even get his details, I would appreciate that, because I'd like to follow that up. Thank you very much. That covers all those questions, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jan de Lange, you are going to provide the details to us so that there can be a follow-up. Can I recognize the hand of Morio Sinyane of Power FM? It's one of those who can raise the hand technologically.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. President.
We can hear you, Murio.
Okay. My question is pertaining to the issue of land, Mr. President. If we look at the Land Act of 1913, and we count the years up to today, it's about 108 years. And we know that there are processes of redistribution of land that are currently underway. But the biggest concern, Mr. President, is the issue of political will. And I think some section of South Africans were sort of encouraged by the political will demonstrated by government in a fight against COVID-19. We have seen some kind of a serious commitment from government to address the challenges that were brought in by COVID-19. Unfortunately, the stealing of PPE monies blinded the whole thing, but we're also encouraged by the fact that the president came up with a special proclamation that set up the Fusion Center, which is doing a fantastic work. But coming to the issue of the National Coronavirus Command Council being guided by science, and one of the issues of social distancing and hygienic into the fight against COVID-19. We look at the majority of South Africans where they are located, Mr. President, staying in shacks, staying in bottled up places where obviously the issue of social distancing, it is not possible. So 108 years later, after the Land Act, which basically legalized the dispossession of land from Africans.
Murio, we need a question because you've just done a long preamble. Can we have the question? Thank you.
The question is, Mr. President, is there a political will to reverse the unjust laws of dispossession of land to make sure that land is distributed to the dispossessed South Africans using the legal instruments as they are currently being provided within the Constitution? Because the feeling is that the matter is being postponed.
Thank you. The question is said. Carol Patton, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for the opportunity. We've spoken for a very long time about trade-offs and these difficult trade-offs that need to be made, and they've been delayed for many years. And I think that this week in the budget, we saw those trade-offs coming into sharp focus. So we've got a 4-year wage freeze for public servants, and we've got social grants not rising in pace with inflation. This means that, the trade-offs are going to be felt by workers, that are going to be felt by the poor. How do you plan to handle this politically? Because clearly, these are your
Thank you, Carol. Can we have Mzondile Mbeje?
Hi, good afternoon, President and the Minister. A quick one from me. The President has really been speaking about the issue of service delivery and saying he wants implementation. But given what some of the towns are looking like, how they are being neglected, and then it's really difficult to see how, honestly, the government will turn around the situation, even where the infrastructure, Mr. President, had been operating. In fact, a very quick example, I mean, I drove past Standerton, and that is a major, an important town, but the way the roads are dilapidated there, you'd think there is no council. So how do you, Mr. President, plan to fix all of that? I know that local government elections are coming, but this does seem like a serious, serious challenge. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mbeje. Can we have Tim Cohen?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much. Hi, Mr. President. Hello, Minister. I appreciate the time, really. It's excellent to hear all the questions and to see you all. I have one quick question, one sort of perhaps longer question. The quick question is, SAA have asked for an extra 3.6 billion rand. I presume no decision has been made, but I just wondered whether you were inclined to give it to them or not. This would be on top of the 16 billion rand that they've got already. Government has sort of bent over backwards to facilitate SAA. I wonder whether you'd be prepared to go the extra mile. The slightly longer question is about, I'm interested in the acquisition of vaccines outside of the ones that we've already got. You mentioned getting vaccines from Russia and from China. How does that process happen? Do we have any contracts signed at this point? How will they take place? Will they take place directly through the governments, or will they take place through third parties or with the companies involved? Is government prepared to work through third parties in this process? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim. The last question on this round is Mr. Hopewell Hadebe. Over to you, Hopewell. Hopewell, are you ready for the question, or should we give it to the next person? If Hopewell is not ready, let's give it to Mr. Spungwala. The last question will take Hopewell later.
Sorry, ma'am, that's an old hand that was covered. I apologize.
Okay, over to you, Sbu.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. President, you said the fight against corruption is continuing and will not be stopped. But we heard that there's on the commission where the former minister, Sidney Fumufamadi, who also headed the high-level review panel into the State Security Agency, give evidence which was damning on one, the Deputy Minister of Human Settlements, Mr. David Mahlobo, but also on the Director General for the Department of Correctional Services, Mr. President. And we understand that you've had this report for a while now. And then the question is, how then should we as South Africans take you seriously about the fight against corruption and wrongdoing when those people were appointed to those positions, knowing fully well that they had been implicated in wrongdoing? Thank you.
Thank you, Sbu. Mr. President, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Minister Chaveni. In relation to Mario's question, is there political will to ensure that land is distributed to those who were dispossessed of their land using legal instruments? I must say that, yes, the political will is there. When I came into office, one of the first things that I did was to make sure that we have a report. We instituted an advisory panel on land, which gave us a report. And thereafter, I appointed the deputy president to be in charge of a task team on the issue of dealing with land, enabling us to deal with land. They are continuously now in the process of distributing land, and hundreds of thousands of hectares have been distributed to our people, and they continue to do precisely that. I have also added another task to them, that I'd like them to go through a proper audit of all those farms that are now lying derelict, that were part of the restitution process that was started years ago. Because a large percentage, it could be even 75% or 60% of the farms that were given to our people through the restitution process are not operational, they're lying derelict for a whole host of reasons. And some of those would be, yes, our own fault, that we never really supported the beneficiaries properly. The structures that we put in place could have also led to debilitating their own efforts to become successful farmers. And as a result, those farms are now lying derelict. And I have said, I'd like that audit, and I want those farms to be revived, because if we are going to deal with the whole land reform process on a bigger scale, we need to start off with those smaller ones, those that we have not done well. So let's put right what we have not done well. At the same time, the political will also revolves around the process that is in Parliament. The political parties in Parliament are in the process of looking how best Section 25 of the Constitution can be amended so as to enable the expropriation of land to take place. We've also passed the Expropriation Act, which is going to enable government to be able, like it happens in any other country in the world, to be able to expropriate land. So all those add up to a very positive political will on our side, that we are determined, prepared to deal with land as an important aspect that will make a contribution to reviving agriculture in our land, in our country, food security, and also improving the livelihoods of the people who live in rural areas, especially women and young people. And as part of that, our determination is also about helping those small, medium farmers in the rural areas and even in the urban areas by employing extension officers who are going to be going out amongst our farming community to assist them. And we are going to be deploying as many extension officers as we possibly can. I always quote the case of Ethiopia, that Ethiopia, many of us will remember years ago, they had famine and death all around, and their agricultural sector was down on its knees. They trained and employed 60,000 extension officers, and that revived their agricultural sector. And today, agriculture is the #1 contributor to their GDP. So it is possible to revive agriculture and to ensure that we give justice to our people and address the issue of land. So the political will is there, and it starts with me. Carol asked the question about trade-offs, and she says that has now come into much sharper focus, that we're instituting a wage freeze for 4 years. I would not even say that, Carol, because wage negotiations take place between the employer and the employees. So those negotiations are now underway, or they are going to commence in earnest. And every year we wait for the outcome of those negotiations, because we cannot just say that this is how they are going to end up, because we've got to give respect to the collective bargaining process. We've also got to give respect to the trade unions that are recognized, that are independent. So that process must go on. On social grants, I will accept that we did not give the increase on social grants in as big a way as we have in the past. We are dealing with close on to 18 million of our people who are struggling. It is difficult, but it also has to be seen in the context of our own affordability. And it's not true that we are loading the negative trade-offs against our people. It's just trying to do a balancing act in relation to the budget. Now, if you look at the budget, 56% of our budget is more inclined towards the social sector, education, health, and social grants, and all that. And some people have dubbed this type of approach as austerity. It isn't austerity. Austerity is when one government reduces wages and just slashes wages of civil servants. Austerity is when social grants are reduced and cut, where the old people, the pensioners, and the children used to get X amount, and it's either cut 25% or even 50%. That is when austerity happens. Some of us will remember what happened in Greece, because that was serious austerity. And in our case, what we should be focusing on is that our budget is tilting more towards the social side, but we also are increasing the investment side. Because one of the things that has often been said is that we are focusing more on consumption, and we're doing a very delicate balance. And this is also in the light of the social relief that we've had to offer to our people during the COVID period. And we have not offered an insubstantial amounts, and this has been on top of the social grant dispensation that we have. If you recall, during the state of disaster, we are still in the state of disaster, when we announced our relief package, 50 billion additional was offered to our people. And now, yes, the increase is not as high as people would have expected, but we've kept those social grants where they were and added a little bit more money. Of course, we would have wanted to do much more. That is what we would have wanted, but it has not been possible. How will we handle it politically? We will be able to explain it. This is not born out of recklessness. This is not born out of neglect. This is born out of dealing with the reality that we have. South Africa has a huge debt burden. Our debt servicing costs are rising at a much faster pace than what we pay for education and health. And if one is in so much debt and the debt keeps rising, it has other unfortunate consequences, which we would like to guard against. But the good part of this is that in the outer years, we do actually work towards a surplus. And working towards a surplus means that we are able to reverse the situation where will be able to make good by our people once again. And this is just to say that we are going through a very difficult time. And even during this difficult time, we have tried to keep things like social grants, the assistance that we give to our people in a way where we do not reduce them inordinately or unnecessarily. Mzwandile wants to know about service delivery. Mzwandile, service delivery is a major challenge to us as a government. Yes, our towns are not in good shape. Like you, I've been through Standerton and I've seen the state of our roads there, and it's a matter of great concern. And through the infrastructure process that we are involved in, where we are now wanting to invest in fixed assets, we are setting aside money for roads. We are setting aside money to deal with all those challenges. And we will be addressing all those on a continuous basis. Tim raises the question of the 3.5 billion. I'm trying to remember what it is, but let me answer the second question you asked. The what? Sorry, remind me.
It was about SAA. I beg your pardon for interrupting.
Oh, yes. Now I remember. I didn't write SAA. I just wrote 3.5 billion. Not that I'm trying to run away from it, Tim. Yes, SAA requires another 3.5 billion. It has not been catered for in the budget. It is a matter that has to be properly discussed. And the approach that Department of Public Enterprises is now taking in all this is that if you make a request, it's not just going to be taken as you arriving at your uncle's door and say, I need money, and you're just given the money. They are going to look at it very, very closely and see what is behind it. And so therefore, for that reason, because that process needs to take place, that has not been done. And Minister Godan is going to be looking at that together with Mr. Tito Mboweni. And we will give it consideration and see where that goes. SAA has been given quite a lot of financial backing. And this is precisely what is a concern to many South Africans. And we need to be aware of that. Quite a lot of billions have gone the way of South African Airways, and we therefore need to look at their requests very, very closely indeed and find out what is the money going to be used for and so on. On the vaccines, how does the process work? The approach that we've taken is that we are going to have a multi-supplier approach to our vaccines. As it is now, we are going through the COVAX facility and through the AVAT facility of the African Union. We are going to get vaccines from a number of suppliers. It will be Pfizer, it will be, yes, AstraZeneca, not for our variant here, but Johnson & Johnson and the others. And we are looking at Sinopharm, we're looking at Sputnik. The negotiations are ongoing. We're not really doing the negotiations through third parties. They are being done more directly, and where the need arises for calls to be made by the minister, even by the president to the other head of state, that happens because vaccines have become a global matter, and heads of government get involved in mobilizing the vaccines for their nations. And we have done the same. Ministers of health who ordinarily never really get involved because it's a procurement issue are also now involved. I got quite deeply involved with the AVAT facility at the African Union side, and I also sit on the global one as one of the co-chairs with the Prime Minister of Norway. So we are involved at that level. So third parties, who are usually your private sector players, are sitting on the supply side, and those are the ones that we negotiate with. So the negotiations are ongoing, and those vaccines, Sputnik and Sinopharm, have been found to have greater efficacy, and the process of getting closer to finalizing those negotiations is ongoing, and I'm sure that it will be concluded soon. Sibungalo wants to know about some of the revelations that have been made at the Zondo Commission. Yes, we had the high panel review, the high-level panel review led by Sidney Mufamadi. It produced a report, and now the Zondo Commission is in the process. And most of the matters that are at the Zondo Commission are obviously going to have to wait for proper synthesis, proper analysis by the Commission, and the Commission is then going to come out with a report. And the report will then be the type that will inform us the full veracity of some of these events and incidents that would have taken place. Now, the Zondo Commission is going to be concluding its work soon, and they will be reporting to me as president, and I will, and of course the report will be made public, and I will then examine the report, the weight of their recommendations, and then there will be a follow-through on the basis of what will have come out of that report. And I prefer to leave those types of matters there, because in the end, I've got to be procedural. I've got to weigh up the decisions that I take on a procedural basis and make sure that we act in accordance with those procedures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are running out of time, but I've got two hands, and so I'm going to give each half a minute to ask their questions. I'll start with Wendell Rolf, and then we'll go to Sianda. No.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. My question is very brief. With regards to the escalating insurgency in neighboring Mozambique, has the Mozambican President Nyusi or his government requested any military or other defense and security aid from South Africa? Is this something that South Africa will consider if asked? And what is your general assessment of the threat posed by this insurgency to South Africa's interests, both domestically as well to the broader SADC region? Thank you.
Thank you, Zianda.
Thank you very much, Minister. Afternoon, Mr. President. Mine is quite simple. Your Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, has recently been implicated in collusion in relation to tenders and tender irregularities. I wanted to ask the President whether or not he believes then this threatens the legitimacy of your coronavirus efforts, especially now that you move towards the next phase of your vaccine rollout. Thank you.
Thank you, Zianda. Mr. President, over to you.
To Leroux's question, I hope I caught the name right. The insurgency incidents that are happening in Mozambique discussed at the SADC level.
Need 1 hour.
The President and the government of Mozambique briefs the SADC family, and those matters are then properly assessed and synthesized, particularly in relation to the threat that they pose. And obviously, we are concerned about the incidents that we keep hearing happening there, and there are quite a number of atrocities in relation to whether we as South Africa are threatened. Yes, of course, we would be facing a threat. There are quite a number of issues that we've got to be alive to, and I can assure you those matters are being addressed, they are being handled, and our security forces are keeping a tab on all those issues. We are well informed, and we cooperate very well, not only with Mozambique, but with various other countries in the region, and they are discussed on an ongoing basis. And because they are, what they are, we would prefer that we leave it at the point where we say those matters are being handled. In relation, I didn't get my sister's name. In relation to Minister of Health, Minister of Health has briefed me about this matter, and I'm glad that he has said that he welcomes any form of investigation in this matter, and he has not participated in any wrongdoing, but he would prefer that the matter be properly investigated, and he will cooperate with any process that will lead to the investigation of this matter. I prefer to leave it there, and will only be able to deal with it once an investigation has revealed something that needs to be acted on. Thank you, Minister Ntshavheni.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are just slightly running out of time, but I would like to invite Mr. Swongwala, the chair of Sanef, to give closing remarks before we hand over to you for the closing.
Right. Thank you very much, Minister Ntshavheni, and thank you very much, President, for taking time out to field questions from us. I hope that our grilling was not as vicious as you anticipated. But I think more importantly, we appreciate this opportunity, Mr. President, to engage with you. And as the year progresses, we will continue to hold your government accountable and to ask those questions. And some of them may be uncomfortable, but the reality is that it's a job that we have to do. Mr. President, before I hand over to you, there are two important issues I'd like to raise. One being that when the coronavirus, when the outbreak was announced in the country, there was a categorization of essential workers where initially journalists were not considered as essential workers. When we engaged governments then reconsidered and allowed journalists essential services status. And I think, once again, Mr. President, as we are now talking about the rollout of the vaccine, once again, we see that journalists, as we know that in terms of categories, you've got the health workers, then essential workers. We understand that this time around, journalists have been left out. Once again, we have written to the minister, to the health department, raising the very issue, because journalists continue to be at risk and to be out on the streets telling the unfolding story of South Africa's coronavirus response. And I think it is important that they are considered among those essential workers. And lastly, Mr. President, we know that Minister Mthembu, by the time of his passing, he had been tasked by yourself to engage with Sanef, among others, around the conversations and discussions on the media, on the sustainability of the media in South Africa. Now that with his passing, we do hope, Mr. President, that we will continue to have those engagements with government, and not just as Sanef, but rather as the media industry in South Africa, as we're looking for solutions to make sure that the independent media in South Africa is supported, and looking at lessons from other jurisdictions. I think more than anything, it would be looking for an undertaking perhaps from your side, Mr. President, that those discussions that had been initiated by Minister Mthembu will be able to continue. With that, Mr. President, thank you very much for your time, and thank you, colleagues, for your questions and for your participation. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, with that, I would like to invite you for your concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sbu, and thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to thank you, Sbu, and Sanef for this opportunity. And as I said, I think the last time, that yes, we should do it periodically because it's important that I also gain an insight into the issues that are prominent in your own thoughts, and as demonstrated today, some of you are able to raise issues that we need to follow up, such as the issues in the Eastern Cape for workers who are health workers who are losing their jobs, as well as the issue in Mpumalanga in relation to the 27 farmers, and it could even be more. Those are matters that we would like to follow up. And unfortunately, I'm sorry that they've had to be raised in the sharp and pointed way as you have, and where you may not have had joy in getting them solved. So I thank you for that, and I thank you broadly for just the general questions, because some of them are insightful. They make us be able to sit back and think, like the question raised by Carol about the trade-offs. We have been talking about trade-offs for quite a long time, as Carol correctly says. And now that we are going through a very, very difficult time from a fiscal point of view, we've got to embark on trade-offs. And some of the trade-offs may be seen in a negative way as are taking the livelihoods of ordinary people. But we need to go through this difficult period with a view of securing a much more stable future for our people as a whole, and not run the country into a real serious debt crisis. I thank you all for your participation in this move. The issue that you raise about the journalists, I would see no problem whatsoever of journalists also being considered amongst those who should get the vaccine at an early stage, because you are frontline workers, all things considered, because you are out there amongst our people, and you should be considered amongst those frontline workers. So I'll raise this with the Minister, the Department of Health as well, and the issue that you were discussing with the late Minister Jackson Mthembu, we will want that to be followed through. Minister Ntshavheni, even in her acting position, will pick up some of those issues. And once we've finalized the other issues of a replacement from Minister Jackson Mthembu, whoever will be appointed will take those discussions forward and make sure that we implement whatever Minister Jackson Mthembu was discussing with you. With those words, thank you very much. I feel thoroughly grilled. I feel like roasted sausage now. And as you go home, just know that you've turned me into a brown sausage. I came here nice and red. Now you've grilled me to being a brown sausage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Time. Indeed, the interaction was progressive. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.